Good morning to everybody who's joining us via live stream. Welcome to this August meeting of the Sunshine Coast Council, our ordinary meeting, and welcome. We're up to item 9.1, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I move that the Council A direct the Chief Executive Officer to ensure the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit preliminary business case and option analysis is not finalised or advanced to the State Government Department of Transport and Main Roads interest check until such time as B below is completed. B, request the Chief Executive Officer to 1. Prepare a report for consideration at the ordinary meeting of the 17th of September 2020 regarding the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit preliminary business case and options analysis, allowing for Council to determine to immediately release the documentation to the public at that time. 2, develop and present a comprehensive and meaningful community engagement plan which must be undertaken, completed and incorporated in the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit preliminary business case prior to proceeding through to Phase 3 of the detailed business case. And 3, communicate to the Department of Transport and Main Roads that Council will only proceed with the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit detailed business case if the community engagement process identifies majority community support for the preliminary business case and options analysis. And 4, ensure the final preliminary business case, including the outcome of the community engagement, is presented to Council for final endorsement and decision prior to proceeding to Phase 3.
Got a seconder? Councillor Winston, thank you. Carry on, Councillor.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I moved to the Sunshine Coast in 1970. Back then, the population of the coast was roughly about 30,000 people. And in that time, I've seen significant growth right across the whole length and breadth of the coast, from Caloundra right through to Noosa. And obviously, we've all seen that growth and we understand the impacts. We understand that we have obligations and we have a need to be able to understand how we're going to be impacted by development in the future, by growth and those impacts. But during that period of time, that growth has been a natural growth that I think people who've lived here, moved here during that period of time, have become accustomed to being able to manage that. It's been at a pace, and I think in recent times there has been an uncomfortable aspect of that growth that is about the acceleration of development and the impact. And we've talked today about the impacts on roads. Most of the roads, obviously, that are impacted as state government roads are significantly underinvested by the state government on the Sunshine Coast, and yet we keep talking about inviting more and more people here. We've set these targets, urban targets, and yet our road infrastructure is failing, and in particular the underinvestment of billions of dollars to our region is quite significant. So this process of the mass transit study has been going on since 2011 in Bob Abbott's council, and it's progressed through the last 2 terms under Mayor Jamison's terms, and now into this his 3rd term. And during that period of time, there has been one time that the council has gone out to do major public consultation, and it was during the period of October and November 2014, 6 years ago, that the last lot of serious public consultation was done on the mass transit. At that time, the community were asked about a whole range of different types of transit options, whether they wanted light rail, rapid bus systems, whatever it was, obviously identify their need, their potential use and so forth, and overwhelmingly the community supported that. You ask people, do you want light rail? As far as I'm concerned, a lot of people's response was yes. But when you put that with the urbanisation strategy that has come into this play after the last regional plan and subsequently in the last couple of years, we've had a team of people work in council that are working towards that corridor, 13-kilometre corridor that's been identified and supported by council, and subsequent reports that have come to council that have identified that that potential corridor could grow in numbers that is extraordinary. And yet there is no indication that we're going to be talking to the community before we hand it over to the state government to take on phase 3. Now, before we do that, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to understand that we have an obligation to make sure that our community really understand what the full impact of the decision in terms of moving forward into phase 3. And these figures that I talk about, 11,000 properties since white settlement that are developed in that 13-kilometre corridor, to move to 50,000. 23,000 people that have settled since white settlement in that corridor, and in the next 21-year planning horizon to just under 104,000 people. It's 5 times that population. Significant change in direction and significant change in the way that we deal with growth and development here on the coast ever since I've been here. That is a game changer. And I think it's incumbent upon us as councillors to make sure that our community is completely aware of it. We should have nothing to hide. If it's so good, then we should be singing out the praises of what we're proposing. We should be putting that to our community without fear that our community would hopefully support it. And if they do, then that's great. We then go with a community that embraces and understands and supports a decision to then give it to the state government. But we don't have that. We don't have that at this point in time in the process. And for me, before we go and spend any further money, I believe that we need to take a break in this process for a couple of reasons. One is that our community needs to have a say. They need to understand and they need to have a say. The other thing is that the Coastal Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy that should have been completed by June 2020 is now being delayed by 6 months.
Councillor, can I get you an extension? I need to get you an extension. Moved, Councillor Johnston. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Suarez. All those in favour? Carry on, Councillor.
And of course, that document is a really important document because this light rail, rapid bus service, whatever we choose, is going to be right in that corridor where this strategy will have a major implication. I don't know what's in that strategy, but it'd be nice to have that informed. So in terms of wanting to proceed forward, councillors, I just don't know why we need to rush this and why we can't take that opportunity to be able to at least go to the community and give them the information that all of us are going to be given. Now, I want to talk about consultation. And all of us, like in our own personal life, if we were husband and wife or partners and we made a significant decision on our own without consulting the other, could you imagine what that will do to the relationship? Can you just imagine? I know partnerships, business partnerships that have fallen apart because one partner took it upon themselves to make a decision and it all fell apart after that. There's no going back. Once you make that decision without consultation, you take it upon yourself to take that decision without bringing those that you should be consulting with along the journey, then I think we will understand the problem that we will have if we don't take the community along with us. I know that since we were elected, public consultation has been a major focus for us. I think engaging with the community. And, you know, we're guided by a number of principles. You know, it's not us. The state government, obviously, they have written into the Local Government Act the local government principles. And I'll just take the extract of A and C. A, it says transparent and effective processes and decision-making in the public interest. In the public interest. And C, democratic representation, social inclusion, and meaningful community engagement. Now, councillors, early in the week, we had Liam Mayo, who was at our workshop dealing with corporate plan. And the reason, you know, I included the word meaningful as part of the community consultation is in BY we all agreed to include meaningful as part of our community consultation. And that's the reason why that is in the wording here. But just to talk through some of the things that Liam had about our strong community and the way that we communicate with our community. And a strong community talks about together we thrive. In all of our communities, people are included, treated with respect, and opportunities are available to all. Our methods of community engagement is that community engagement is a process that ultimately seeks to involve the community, that is, citizens, businesses, and stakeholders in matters that affect the community. Engagement processes can extend from an information sharing and consultation phase to an interaction, to an active participation level of involvement and collaboration. It is well documented that effective community engagement and involvement of community and decisions that matter to them leads to better decision making and shared outcomes. That's in our corporate plan. And that is the corporate plan that is from before. That hasn't been modified. And what the community have told through that build-in of the corporate plan, when exploring the excellence in engagement, they were asked what an engaged community meant to them. And their response was that they wanted collaboration and activation, inclusion and cohesion, to be made aware, involved, and to be heard. That is significant. To be made aware. I want the community to be made aware of what's in the preliminary business case. I want them to be involved in communicating back to us, and then I want us, councillors, for them to be heard. And when they talk about the proactive principles, they talk about that they are to engage early, engage often, and be proactive. And that's exactly what I'm saying here. Engage early. Don't wait deep down into the detailed business case and then hope that we can pull it back from there. Let's deal with it now. Let's show the community what's there. And the one thing that, as part of that proactive principles, was that identify the non-negotiables. And councillors, I can't identify anything more significant about the preliminary business case and options analysis is a non-negotiable, as far as I'm concerned, for our community, that they expect to be consulted, they expect to be engaged early, and they expect to be heard. So I would hope that councillors can support the notice of motion that I put before you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Just want to firstly acknowledge Councillor Natoli in putting this notice of motion forward. If you can give him anything, it's consistency. He's been out there talking about this for some time and he's consistently followed up. To start with, I don't have any problem for the record with community consultation. I'm happy to back that. A recent example was the M2M cycleway in Councillor Natoli's area. I get it. Obviously, it's about communication with residents. But let's have a reality check here and get real. The people mainly impacted by mass transit and development along the coastal foreshore area, and I call that Division 2 and 3 and 4, mainly the impacted areas. They're the people who are speaking up. We're hearing from them, and I've seen some surveys done, about 450 responses. In the last couple of weeks, I've had 2 residents I've verified from Division 6 raise the issue with me, and they both sent a verbatim copy of a cut and paste from online. So I get it. They're sharing their expression of frustration. I've got a few difficulties here. Very, very happy with that. Very, very happy with the engagement. Fine. Happy to support it because I think that's exactly what Council was going to do anyway when we meet to discuss this in the future. That's what I'm preempting. I mentioned to Councillor Natoli this morning my difficulty here is in B3, and that is about locking Council in my opinion, to only moving forward if we get majority support of the Sunshine Coast region. Now, depends how you want to play this. In my mind, if the region speaks up and says to Division 2, 3 and 4, get real, we need mass transit, we need development, and the rest of the region dictate to that corridor, that may not play into the favour of Councillor Natoli. So that could go either direction, Councillor Joe. You could have your region speak up by majority and it outweighs the rest of the region. Don't know. I can't predict that, but I don't support us locking ourselves into a decision now because we haven't even had that level of work come to us. So I'll keep speaking, and I'd like Councillor Natoli to consider potentially allowing an amendment or considering an amendment for B3 to remove any reference to Council not proceeding unless it has the majority support for the prelim business case. So have a think about that. But there's a lot to consider here, Mr Mayor. You've got a transport strategy, which is one thing. You're talking about mass transit. Is it rapid bus transport? Is it light rail? Don't know. Don't know. Could be driverless cars. Don't know. We're planning for it. We've got a planning scheme review that hasn't even started. We haven't even started our work on the new town plan. What does that mean? Where is the growth? Will this council continually allow major rampant development like Aura and Palmview? Will it allow that? Will it have another 10 of those estates to compensate for infill development, knocking down trees, building satellite cities all the way out to the hinterland, destroying the fabric of the Sunshine Coast? Or do we continue to focus on putting people where the services are, where the hospitals are, where the schools are, and building a public transport system for that? I think there's a debate that needs to be had, and transport goes hand in hand with the development strategy that we haven't got. When people email me or call me and say, Christian, no 40-storey buildings on the beach, well, yeah, I agree with them too. I haven't seen those plans for Gold Coast or Brisbane-style development in that corridor. I haven't seen them. If you've got those plans, show me, because I haven't seen them. I've asked our staff for them. I called Mr Rupre this morning and asked him for those plans as well. Where is the Gold Coast high-rise development proposals that this council has? Show me them, because I want to see them. He hasn't got them. We haven't got those plans. We haven't even got to that stage yet. So there's a lot of water to go under that bridge yet, Mr Mayor, but I do support Councillor Natoli's notion that we need to be in this together. We need to have that journey. We need to bring residents with us, and we need to hear their suggestions. And on that point, I want to hear their suggestions. Consistently, what I do hear a lot of is what we don't want. We don't want this and we don't want that, and that's okay. People can express those opinions, but bring some solutions to the table as well. I think our local state members could help us with that as well. We're very, very close to an October election, and I'd like to hear some more commitments from our state members about what they can do and not what they don't support. Let's hear about what the state members can bring to the table, because it's this council and the Labor government who have been continually delivering on transport outcomes for this region. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. We've got a $7.5 million match with the state government, the Labor government, to actually start to take public transport serious on the Sunshine Coast. I'm not trying to play politics, Mr Mayor, but it'd be easier if those in other parties, even independents, came forward and had a solution for us. You know, if it's not light rail and it's not density and it's not rapid transport, what is it? Let's actually see some other plans and put them out there and see if we can bring these people to the table and actually talk about what solutions there are. So in closing, Mr Mayor, if Councillor Natoli would consider some form of an amendment to B3, I would actually like to support him here today.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Babrowski.
Thank you. And through you, Mr Mayor, a couple of questions, if I may, first. Mr Mayor, given that Councillor Natoli has raised development associated with mass transit, I think it's important to consider what the alternatives would be if we do not allow some density increases around mass transit stations. Councillor Natoli has made a number of public statements on his Facebook page about what they should be. And I'd like to know if those comments reflect Councillor Natoli's views about the alternatives. These comments include, well, why not use the only rail corridor we have, which is about to be duplicated to house the population increases? To a commentator who disagreed with him, he said, move the future population growth to the rail corridor. They already have a north-south track. He also said, why won't you consider putting the population growth along the existing rail corridor, Glasshouse to Yandina? And why aren't you advocating for those 80,000 people to be allocated along the existing rail corridor? And another commentator on his page said, population growth along the rail corridor is the way to go as long as it's not on the coastal strip. Councillor Natoli responded, my view, exactly. It does not need to be along the coastal strip. So again, I'd like to know if these comments reflect Councillor Natoli's views.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. I'm really pleased that you're taking note of some of those comments on my Facebook page. When we had the first and only briefing about mass transit here, and I asked the consultant, what other options have you considered in regards to the urbanisation strategy? Because I didn't see this as a mass transit study. I saw it as an urbanisation strategy with a light rail or rapid bus service to enable that population growth to happen in that 13-kilometre corridor. And his response to me was that that was any option that council gave him. So I'm putting out that maybe we haven't considered all of the options that we should be considering. And we have a CAMCOS corridor that comes off from Biwa that will go through big future growth centres of Aura and Biwa East. And that rail line goes close to the through past Caloundra Road, where it could accommodate a station for the Caloundra people, fixing some of the problems on Caloundra Road that we may have, and we do have every time we come to Caloundra. It goes on to the hospital, exactly where the light rail will end up in option, the first stage, and then it continues on to the Quina Business Centre and to the Maroochydore new CBD. We have these options. We've got that corridor. But why aren't we talking about these other options? Why is it all of a sudden that there's only one option on the paper, on the table? The community has had no say about this. This is something that has been obviously put to the consultant. This is the only option available for you to consider and work on that option only. I'm saying to you that the community should have a say on how we want this to be developed. If you want to make the 23,000 people in that corridor the sacrificial lambs and allow them to endure the mass growth that they have and their lifestyle choices that they've made to be given up for something that I'm not even sure will work. I'm not even sure being able to get my head right down into the detail of the preliminary business case because it hasn't been tabled at this stage. And I don't have a copy of it. All I've had is a briefing. So that's where my comments are coming, that we should have more than one option on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Babarowski, carry on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, another alternative that Councillor Natoli has raised, well, now several times, is increasing the number of dwellings in Caloundra South area. I would like to know if Councillor Natoli would still propose that that should be considered as an alternative to development in what he calls the coastal strip.
As I said, that's another option that we should consider. Again, the CAMCOS rail corridor comes right between those two major centres. Most of it's greenfield. We keep allowing these developers to build these low density, some people might call them high density, but they're basically detached lots, very small detached lots, cram a lot of people in there, but they can even go greater than that. They built a high density, transit-orientated communities around the CAMCOS rail corridor. That could be another option. At least those people that buy into that know exactly what they're going to get. At least we can have it designed. If we're going to head down that path and encourage people to use public transport, make that community design around that, as we are doing with the CBD in Maroochydore. So again, I keep putting to you, councillors, The consultant has only looked at one option. I'm putting it out there to say that as part of this consultation process, I believe the broader community has a right to have a say about how we deal with the future urbanisation of the Sunshine Coast. That's all I've said.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rosten.
I do have a further question, but then I'd like to speak to the motion. Through you, Mr Mayor, considering that Councillor Natoli has been publicly calling into question, I think, the motives of Council and the councillors, I think it's important to get everything out in the open. In an online discussion on this issue 2 weeks ago, Councillor Natoli used his official Facebook page to like a comment that called me personally a spruiker or marketeer for high density and light rail, called me a crony of the mayor, and described me as gushing at the prospect of the money his white-shoed mates could make out of this. Look, as someone who does my best to treat my colleagues with respect, and as someone who's never taken a dollar, not a dollar from developers, and no connection to the development industry, I'd like to know what Councillor Natoli meant by liking that comment. Was it agreement, encouragement, both, or what?
Councillor Babarowski has previously made strong representation in regards to the view that this is the panacea for all of our, for the future growth, infill growth that we have here on the coast. And the fact that you want to put that into a corridor, in that 13-kilometre corridor, is purely because you need the numbers, you need the development to happen to make light rail work. Now, I know that this is a passionate issue for you, and you've taken the carriage for that. You've taken it forward in terms of newspaper as well as television stories that have been documented. And you go out there and you say that you are supporting this process. And what happens out of that is that we have the potential of massive development. And who's going to benefit from that? I never said that you personally would, but the development industry certainly would be very interested in making sure that they could develop in the prized location along the beach corridor. And I'm sure that if we were to talk about other areas along the coast, like Coolum, right through along the coastal fringes, all the way through to Maroochydore to Caloundra, then that's just the easy stuff for the developers. We just keep opening up the corridors for them to be able to do that. And I ultimately think that we need to understand that it's people's lifestyles out there that need to be protected and understood. And the prayer today by the pastor clearly indicated that we want to ensure that we can preserve the enviable lifestyle that we have here on the coast. And that's all that comment was about.
Do you want to speak now, or you are happy for some other?
I'm happy for some others.
Councillor Landsberg.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and I'll break up the conversation a little bit, but first of all, as a new councillor and witnessing what's happened in the past, and I have been a resident here for over 35 years and watched the changes of our roads and infrastructure and the demands on everything, and even my own daughter now takes 40 minutes to drive from Maroochydore to Watala. Not a happy camper, I can tell you. But our transit bus services, a driver I know personally, the abuse that they witness on the roads out to Aura, where there's no drop-off points, the roads aren't wide enough. People want action, and to finally acknowledge the state government that they will support a business case plan for us and put the money on the table is a huge achievement to get there. After kicking off this community engagement, or the process, from 2012 with your line in the SAM report, in which I will read just from the last meeting on the 30th of January this year, 2020. The line in the sand process included a broadly representative community task force supported by expert advisors from council. It canvassed 6 technology options for a mass transit system as a game changer for the Sunshine Coast. An online consultation hub launched in 2012 attracted more than 2,900 visits and 228 people that took part in a poll on the hub. The recommended proposal for light rail on the Sunshine Coast was supported by 82% of those who completed the poll. 2014 was the Sunshine Coast light rail options that was put out there. More than 700 people had their say on the light rail route options proposed for Maroochydore, Mooloolaba, Kawana and Caloundra, and the vast majority, 87%, supported Council's investigations into light rail, and their feedback contributed to the selection of route options for further study. 2018, there was a draft integrated transport strategy, and Council undertook market research and community consultation between 2017 in November to July 2018 to help shape the integrated transport strategy, which was adopted by Council in late 2018. Key findings from this market research and community consultation relevant to the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit Project strategic business case has been integrated with the business case workings. Then finally, from the January meeting, was further comprehensive community consultation is expected to be part of the detailed business case phase, which will be led by the Queensland Government in partnership with Council, likely to occur in 2021. Now, we talk about the process moving on. Our community want movement. They want answers now. They want this project to move forward. We finally received acknowledgement from the state and federal governments that are spending huge amounts of money now out on the Bruce Highway that we need a better form of transport. And if I can continue, Mr Mayor, I'll just read a few other little notes here. With this that came in the mail, which my mother-in-law obviously rang and really was interested in regards to, Terry, what's going on? High-rises and everything coming to the Sunshine Coast. Well, it's a really knee-jerk reaction of people that don't understand what the future and what we have to meet in terms of the population growth that the state government put onto us. If that was to change from the state government, we can have a different conversation, but they are questions we need to put to our state representatives. So, first of all, the mass transit system does not require high-rise to be effective and efficient. It requires appropriate and relevant densities determined within a radius of that mass transit station, whether it's 400 metres, 800 metres or a kilometre. If you look at places in Europe like Paris and London, to name just a few, they don't have high-rises everywhere along their mass transit link systems. There are numerous places around the world that's proof that it's density, not high-rises, that is the key to an integrated transport system. The mass transit system is planned for the enterprise corridor proposed plan, after we go through a state government business case-led scenario, is where Council has for a number of years made it clear to the community that growth and the residential density that goes with it will go. At this time, in terms of I'm yet to hear that density is high-rise from anyone. So claiming that that's going to happen from these flyers that have contributed to our residents here is people just haven't done their homework. It's like jumping at shadows. These people want to create a coast to stagnate and not move with the times, which of course would make our region less competitive and less livable. Any delay to the mass transit system results in higher car use, higher traffic volumes, more congestions and reduced productivity. Less affordable...
Councillor, do you need an extension?
Yes, please.
Councillor Cox, happy to move. Second to Councillor Dixon. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Carry on. More congestion. Less affordable due to money needed to build wider roads, more car parks, which I'm sure you would acknowledge as a major issue, and in itself is self-defeating as it only leads to livability spiralling down and more cost to ratepayers without a positive return and due to more emissions, poor air quality and, importantly, a delayed mode of change transport, which people have to look at in the future, how we are going to move from A to B on the Sunshine Coast. Further impacts of a delayed mass transit system are things like the convenience and the affordable living options as the coast grows. Density, not high-rise, around mass transit system stations allows people to live in closer proximity to employment, hospitality services, medical, entertainment, beaches, etc.
and it does encourage a more active style of lifestyle. So that future, what are we looking at? Most households may only have one car, not two. Using your bike to get to work, a motorcycle, or just generally walk, and increase your walking as well. So what comes out of this is improved health. It goes with more of an active lifestyle. So any delay just pushes out all known and verifiable advantages that a mass transit system can provide without high rise. So the culture or the mode change is a key component of all of us living here long term on the Sunshine Coast. And just quickly, any delay is a detriment to our lifestyle. And we've got to think of our children and our children's children. We're making decisions here. This has to move forward. Sorry, not that motion, but the business case for the state government, we have to engage that as soon as possible, and people want answers. So just finishing up on that, I'd just like to say it has been proven around the world that a mass transit system requires density along the route, but it does not require high-rise.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, I just have a couple of questions to start with. I guess perhaps to maybe put things in context for anyone who's tuning into this discussion at the moment, could we ask the acting CEO or the relevant council officer to just briefly describe what the preliminary business case and options analysis, what that process is and why we are looking at doing that in the future?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the way a business case works is that you undertake, there's a three-phase approach. The first one is a strategic business case, which looks at the bigger picture, the whole of the Sunshine Coast, and gives you some guidance as to how the transport network will work. That was completed and provided out through the processes several months ago in relation to that, and it highlighted that for our particular area, the most important thing was a link between Maroochydore and Kawana, and obviously the second most important thing was a link between Kawana and the main line in relation to Biwa. It highlighted that we should go on and do further work in relation to that first stage. So a preliminary business case starts to look in more detail in relation to those provisions, particularly between Maroochydore, Kawana and Caloundra, as to what kind of a mass transport options can occur. Remember, at this stage you are just testing options and trying to determine whether they're real, whether they actually are technically able to occur, whether they can financially be afforded in relation to that in this very early stage of the process. It is significant work that's required because it's a lot of engineering technical components to it and a lot of modelling to actually run those components. That preliminary business case basically gives an indication as to whether you should progress on and do the real more detailed study, the study that requires a lot more detail in relation to community consultation and components going forward. So it's kind of like an interim stage. You move from the strategic to the preliminary before you really make the call that it is worthwhile spending the money and doing the detailed business case. And that's where we are at the moment. We're at the final stages of the preliminary business case. We're gaining intel and information in relation to it, and obviously we're learning from some of the parties who will be responsible for either building it or funding it, being the state government or the federal government, and making sure that those agencies are providing those commentary. So it's a little bit like going through a large grant program. You kind of have a proposal, you move through the next phase, you determine whether it's reasonable before you go forward. Before any decisions are made, though, post the detailed business case, there needs to be commitment in terms of funding it, and then detailed provisions in relation to how it may roll out over a long period of time. Because these projects do not occur overnight, they'll occur over probably a 20 or 30-year time frame.
Carry on.
Just to follow on, I've got a couple of questions, Mr Mayor. I should have asked in the outset, Mr Acting CEO, what would be the cost associated to do the preliminary business case and options analysis, and has the previous community consultation to date been factored into us moving towards this next phase?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah. Every part of the process is actually informing the next part. So all of the work that was done as part of the line in the sand, the work that was done in relation to that has all been passed across and keeps informing the program going forward. The cost of a preliminary... preliminary business case costs around about between $2 and $3 million in relation to it, which sounds like a lot of money, but a lot of it is actually in detailed engineering to see whether it's physically able to occur and what some of the costs associated with that physical component are, to make sure that there is a logical put forward. It's not just a pie in the sky. You think it would cost this much. At this stage, you need to know whether it's feasible in terms of dollar terms. Obviously, the next stage, the detailed business case, as mentioned previously, is a 7.5 from the state and 7.5 by ourselves to actually undertake that detailed work. And that's required to have significant community consultation, significant engineering designs and significant localised work to actually make sure it's possible to achieve, so that if at the end of that process, if someone said yes, it's able to be built, it actually can physically be built.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Yes, Councillor Suarez.
Just one more question, and then I'd like to hear the debate and perhaps summarise at the end. This question is to you, Councillor Natoli. Just looking at your notice of motion, I'm a little conflicted between points number 3 and points number 4. So in point number 3, you are requesting that we communicate to the Department of Transport and Main Roads that Council will only proceed with the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit detailed business case if the community engagement process identifies majority community support for the preliminary business case and options analysis. And then in the next point, point number 4, ensure that the final preliminary business case, including the outcomes, is presented to Council for final endorsement and decision prior to proceeding to phase 3. So I'm just trying to get a better understanding of what your intentions are with those 2 points.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Well, councillors, I'm happy to delete point 3, B3. If it's a concern, I'm happy to have that taken out. The only reason I had it in there is during the election campaign while I door knocked, and I door knocked this extensively. There were a lot of comments about how people felt that the council wasn't listening to them. They'd seen significant decisions made. Segasui was a classic example, and just recently we saw the decision on Twin Waters West, in particular with the planning scheme amendment, where, you know, a large proportion, 6-1 against, and yet council had supported. So the commentary to me was that they felt that, you know, council wasn't listening to the community, and they wanted to make sure that council, if recognised that there was concerns from the community, that it would be taken on board. And the other aspect in terms of ensuring the preliminary business case, if we are going to go through this consultation process, I think it's incumbent upon us to bring it back to council, understand what that means, and then make a final decision to send it on to phase 3. Before we do that, if we are going to include the community, then it's us that have to listen. We were elected by the community to listen, so that's the reason why I had it in there.
Okay, I'm up to Councillor Dixon for a question.
Well, I actually would like to move an amendment, and I did flag earlier for Councillor Natoli to potentially consider something. I put it through to meeting management. So it would be B3, and my proposed change would be communicate to the Department of Transport and Main Roads that Council will only proceed with the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit detailed business case after it has completed community engagement with relation to the prelim business case and options analysis and. So that would be my change in it. For me, Mr Mayor, just to explain, that removes in my mind the trigger that, you know, council's only going to proceed if it gets majority support. I think do the community consultation, let DTMR know that we're going to do that. We're not going to progress with you until we've done it. And I think that flows pretty well there. I would be happy to support that change and support the motion moving forward. So it's up to the mover and the seconder.
Yeah, you need to move it as an amendment, I think.
Yep. Yep. I think we can. We can move it as an amendment to the original. Yep. Mr Mayor, just checking through you and to the CEO, is it possible if I just move that as an amendment to the original and get that accepted by the mover and seconder, or do I need to move this as a new block?
No, look, I would accept if the original mover and seconder are happy to make the alteration.
Okay.
Both happy? Okay, we'll stick with the same motion. I think we're up to Councillor Law. No? I thought my apologies. It is. Sorry. Because it's a notice of motion, sorry, we can't do that. My apologies. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Dixon and seconded by Councillor Winston. He did. So, Councillor Winston, you're already in the frame. Is someone else prepared to second? You're moving it. Need someone else to second because Winston was the seconder of the original motion. Councillor Hungerford.
So, councillors and through the Mayor, I think my debate's been pretty clear and hopefully we'd get the majority support. I know Councillor Winston and Natoli are on board, and I heard Councillor Suarez raise that issue in terms of streamlining and the conflict between 3 and 4. If you'd be happy to support that, I think this will get us to where Councillor Natoli was hoping to go, but without locking council necessarily into not proceeding unless you get that majority support. A bit ambiguous for me, and as I explained earlier, how do you quantify what that is?
Thank you. Any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak to the amendment and just say that I'm more comfortable with what's being proposed now than I was previously, because I wouldn't have supported the original notice of motion. But with this amendment that Councillor Dixon's proposed, I'm certainly supportive of this minor change.
Thank you. Councillor Suarez.
I'm also more supportive of this notice of motion with the current amendment as well. And I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Natoli's comment that in the past the community have felt that they have not been listened to, and I would agree with that. And I think the debate that we've had today has clearly demonstrated that the community have a lot more questions about this project, as well as the councillors in this room. I had a look through some of the documentation prior to this, and we have had our presentations. And my understanding is that the options analysis will consider the final 2 options, which was the light rail system as well as the rapid bus transport network. However, I am a bit concerned with the previous work that has been done with a very heavy weighting towards light rail only as the option. Indeed, as far back as 2012, the Line in the Sand project, if you have a look at the front cover of that report, it's called The Line in the Sand, the Sunshine...
Councillor, you're actually talking to the amendment,
okay,
which probably needs you to limit to that. Once the amendment becomes the motion,
okay,
we can come back to more detail at that stage.
All right, I'm happy to support the amendment as it has been proposed.
Any further speakers? Councillor O'Prey.
One question for clarity, Mr Mayor, just that so that all councillors are aware, we're only voting on the amendment now. Once the amendment's been voted on, it becomes a motion, then we make another vote on the motion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Law.
Just a question to Councillor Dixon. Thank you for the amendment. Would you consider removing the word only?
Thank you, Councillor Law. Just to be frank, I'm really trying to get as many councillors as I can on board today to support Councillor Natoli, and I'm not trying to take away from what he's brought here today. I'm quite happy with it remaining in there in terms of only. I'm quite happy with it reading as it is. I think it's quite straightforward. I'm not sure if you could explain a bit further on what the benefit would be in removing that. I know we're getting quite crafty with our words, but I'm open to hearing what your argument might be.
It just is a very constricting part. So when we had the original motion for B3, the word only of being connected with if there is majority community support. So the only to me references the majority of community support, and if we're removing majority community support, which you have done, and I think that is a great enhancement, I rather think that we also should remove the only part that references majority community support.
And Mr. Mayor, just a response on that. Yeah, you can really take it any which way you'd like, and I respect that view. But for me, we're saying, you know, previously we were only going to move forward if we got the majority support. Well, for me, that was a bit of a bridge too far, but I think we should only move forward if we do that genuine community consultation. And for me, that takes back originally what Councillor Joe wanted, and that was do your community consultation. That's what I campaigned on, and that's what I've said I wanted to achieve. So let's only move forward if we actually do that and honour that commitment. So I'm actually wanting to leave that in, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Winston.
Mr. Mayor, I support the amendment. Putting the word only in there doesn't bring it back to what it was before. Leaving the word only there just means that we will only proceed with the Sunshine Coast Mass Transit detailed business case after we have completed it. If you take only out, it says we will only proceed. It means the same thing. It's just, we're dealing in semantics, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Everyone had enough to say? We put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, that's Councillor Dixon, Hungerford, O'Prey, Suarez, Law, Jamieson, Natoli and Johnston. Those opposed? Councillor Cox and Councillor Landsberg. So the amendment now becomes the motion. So we're back to any further speakers? Sorry, you go first, Councillor O'Prey.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make some comments. I haven't spoken to it at the motion, or even made it ask questions, to be honest. But consult. Talk about it all the time. I think we need to do more of that. It is a bit of a timing issue for me, knowing that there hasn't been a lot of community consultation over the last 6 years. And I'm very, very happy that that III has been amended. So thank you very much to Councillor Dixon for that. Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to also address in my words here today is about what Councillor Rick had experienced. I made my experiences and thoughts very clear to this councillor group very early in this term about idiot comments on Facebook and online commentary. It's a bigger fool to start liking and acknowledging. And I can tell you right now, I think there's two things that a like on a Facebook page or any social media platform means. It means an acknowledgement. I like it because I understand it, I get it, yeah, I agree, that's all right. Or it's support. It means you acknowledge it, support it, and like it. If this councillor group's going to continue down that path, it's disgusting behaviour. We need to have each other's backs all the time. The social media world's horrible out there. I mean, it's disgusting. I've got two young girls I'm trying to train, delete and block, their two favourite words. And yet here at this table, the democracy of the Sunshine Coast, we've got commentary and past commentary slagging on each other. It's not on. So, Councillor Joe, with that, I'd like to encourage you to just take that on board, mate, because it's not going to be well liked, it's not well respected. In fact, quite the contrary. I think you need to adjust what you're doing on your Facebook commentary. But with that, Mr. Mayor, I will support Councillor Joe's amendment and Councillor Christian's amendment, today. I think we do need to consult more often. And that's all I need to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The most important thing is that we have good community consultation, and I'm far more comfortable with the amendment that we have achieved through Councillor Dixon, and thank you for that. I would just like to make sure that while we're talking about alternatives, and there's been a mention of using the existing main rail line north to south, looking at other things like that and increasing the urban footprint and developing in alternate areas is going to put pressure on being able to achieve no net loss of vegetation, which is part of our environmental and livability strategy. There are commitments that have been made as part of the South East Queensland Plan that says that we won't be creating urban sprawl. And there's been a lot of work done since the Line in the Sand report, and one of the comments in there is that there will be informed community consultation. So I'm very pleased that we are making it very clear and very certain that we want community consultation. But while we go through that process of consultation, we're talking about public transport. We have a current challenge with our public transport in the area already, and while this program is going through, I'm not clear that we know exactly when we may be delivering on the various parts of this public transport improvement and upgrade, and what will be our population level at that point, and how will our congestion be at those times in the future. So while we're consulting, can we make sure that we're consulting with a very future view, and with a future view that responds and talks to our community strategy, that talks out to 2041, that responds to our economic development strategy that talks out to 2033, and that talks to the environmental and livability strategy that looks out to 2041. And that while we're going through the work that must be done to make the Sunshine Coast a healthy and smart place to live, that we consider the whole of what that looks like and not just one part in isolation, which then can become a little bit fearful. So please consult, and I'm very pleased that we're going to consult on this. It's so important that we get as much input from our community as we can, along with the input that we got during the recent campaign that has resulted in this council coming together in April. So I'm very pleased to see that there, and that it's there in the current form, not the previous one. But thank you to everyone involved to getting us here. But make sure we consult with a future vision and a future view, so that what happens on the Sunshine Coast is something that is meaningful in 2050, not something that is what we may want to think should be sustained from now or 20 years in the past. So thank you, and I will be supporting the motion that we have for the community consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I always appreciate the comments David, Councillor Law, makes in these matters, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of context as to where we're at in this whole process. And I just wanted to go back, because we're talking about the population of the Sunshine Coast growing from approximately 330,000 now to around 518,000 by 2041. In fact, it was actually only at the last ordinary meeting that I quoted a Courier Mail article that claimed the Sunshine Coast had the fastest growth rate in Australia for the past decade. So thankfully, our council has continually said that we're planning ahead to ensure the livability and lifestyle we enjoy today will still be available in the future. However, to achieve this, a high-quality integrated public transport solution is required to address the growing needs of our road congestion, prevent development from spreading into our green areas, as Councillor Dixon said, the urbanisation or urban sprawl, support continued high levels of people being employed on the Sunshine Coast rather than travelling to Brisbane for work, and to reduce the dependency on the private motor vehicle. So, as you can see, a do-nothing approach is simply not an option. I also wanted to confirm that it's highly important for us to highlight that consultation on the broad need for improved transport connections and consolidation of our urban development has been carried out during the formation of Council's key planning documents and strategies. And councillors, these include the Regional Economic Development Strategy in 2013. One of the actions contained upon that document in the 2013 to 2018 actions identify and preserve a future public transport corridor to connect major business centres, tourism, education and population centres within the enterprise corridor. So that's clearly contained in that key regional economic development strategy. So then in the planning scheme in 2014, it's reinforced once again. The third document the Environment and Livability Strategy in 2017, widely consulted upon. Again, it states that it is anticipated that future growth will be predominantly located in the coastal area with an emphasis on infill development, transitioning to a more consolidated urban form supported by appropriate infrastructure such as a light rail system. And then last year, we're talking about the community strategy. Once again, all of these key documents have had significant community consultation and engagement. And it's underlined in all of those documents. So it's not just in 2012 or 14 when we consulted with our community about this line in the sand. It's far greater than that. I also find it quite frustrating when I read comments in the paper, including one this morning, about Councillor Natoli giving Council a reality check over mass transit plan. I think, councillors, we've all been on this journey for a long time, well, most of us have, and I fully understand what the intent is. Claims of wall-to-wall development and high-rises in that 13-kilometre corridor, I'm sorry, is just disingenuous and misleading, and I just think the community needs to know that this is not Council's intent, and certainly no planning scheme actually supports that particular motion. Now, as I've attempted to demonstrate, population increase will be happening in the coastal corridor regardless of a mass transit solution. So to say otherwise is simply not correct. And interestingly, when I talk with my community, a large part of Division 3 falls in this coastal corridor or enterprise corridor, I'm yet to meet a resident that thinks an 8-lane Nicklin Way is a better or smarter solution than what the preliminary business case is actually considering, rapid transport or a light rail system. There's no resident out there that I'm yet to meet that thinks that that's a better solution. So I think it's incumbent upon all councillors to look at the legacy of a do-nothing approach and to actively engage all aspects of the mass transit solution and not just engage in these scare tactics, as Councillor Landsberg showed with some of the flyers that's been circulating throughout the community. And I'd also encourage, especially the new councillors, to interrogate the integrated transport strategy, to understand the consequences that our communities will be facing into the future if we don't consider what's here today in terms of the PBC. So, councillors, I also just wanted to quickly talk that...
I'll just get you an extension if you need
one. That'll do, Mr Mayor. I'm happy with that.
All right, okay. Councillor Winston.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the resolution as it now stands. I had some concerns, although I did second the original motion. Look, if you go out to the public and you say to the public, would you like a better transport system on the Sunshine Coast? Of course they're going to say yes. It's a lay down misère. But if you go out to them and say to them, will you support a better transport system if it means this and this and this, you may not get the same result. You may not get the same answers. And that's all I'm saying. We need to have a bit more consultation, a bit more information for the people to make a decision. And I think that they'll come on board. Let's not have a decision in relation to providing a transport system which is fixed to a particular location that's going to increase density. We're not talking about high rise, all right? But, you know, if we're increasing density, to suggest that people will then go back to one car, well, the reality of the situation is that most of the people that live along that corridor at the present moment, or a large percentage of them, are tradies. They're not going to go down to one car. They're still going to have their two cars. We're going to treble the population in that area. So let's have a proper consultation. Let's have proper discussion about it. Let's tell the public what the options are, what the alternatives are. So far, I haven't seen anything about feed-in transport to this system, because this system that is being proposed so far is not going to work if it just goes along one corridor and doesn't have proper feed-in. And are we going to have a situation where our transport policy, or preferred one, is going to drive our future town plans, or are they going to work together? That's what we need to decide upon. And, you know, I'm just saying, let's be more transparent with the public. Let's consult a bit more. I'm not saying we shouldn't go ahead with this, right? And I don't think anybody here is saying that we should go ahead with it. And I know that there have been some emotive and, quite honestly, stupid statements that have been made by some people, you know? But it's because of ignorance in a lot of cases. And it's a reaction. And, you know, we promised, a number of us when we stood for council this time, we promised that we were going to be more open, we were going to have more consultation, etc., etc. That's all this resolution is moving. It might slow it down for 2 or 3 months, and then we can move forward, and hopefully we can take the people with us, not against us. I'm fearful that if this just goes to the state and the state finishes up dealing with it the way that they did with the cyclist situation, that they're going to come back with something which hasn't been consulted with the community, and then there's going to be hell to play when that happens. So let's get a bit more backing for our position when we take it to the state, and before we invest $7.5 million, we need to know that what we're investing in is what the community will accept. We're not spending $7.5 million of ratepayers' money on some proposal that's going to come back that doesn't reflect what the community wants. Thank you.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and apologies for speaking to the motion previously, breaking protocol, and still understanding the process. Just to further reiterate some of the comments that Councillor Winston made, and also Councillor Cox. I agree with Councillor Winston. I think everybody wants a public transport system that's usable and going to support the community, but to understand what this mass transit corridor is going to mean in terms of development, that's what's missing. Now, Councillor Cox has highlighted that it has been mentioned in a number of various documents, and that is correct. But really, when we do the community consultation, that information should go hand in hand with the information that's presented with the corridor. And I think if we do have this consultation, it's going to let the community understand what the intent of this transit system is, and allay some of the fear and the misinformation that may be out in the community. So that is why I'm supporting this. I believe that the community need to understand the options for the transit system, not just light rail, the development that may be associated with it, and what it will mean for them now and in the future. Thank you.
Any further speakers?
Just a question, Mr Mayor, through to potentially Mr Bunker. Is it correct that the PBC findings will be coming to Council at a special meeting next week?
Mr Mayor, we've been looking for a special meeting at the end of this month to actually bring forward a lot of this information in relation to it. We've just been working through the documentation at the moment. The main focus is understanding where we've got to, and also understand the community consultation components going forward.
So, further question then. So, when could we expect that report to be made available?
Through For you, Mr Mayor, the report is currently with myself for final sign-off before calling the meeting early next week, or hopefully by middle of next week. So at this stage, we've been waiting for the report to be finalised. We've been waiting for the information to come through, and obviously we'll bring it to Council as soon as we possibly can in relation to that. At this stage, we're still looking at Thursday next week for the report to come to Council.
And lastly, this report will be a publicly accessible report, I would presume.
Through Mr Mayor, yeah, we try and make sure that the main part of the report, which covers components, is a public component, and make sure that that's enough to ensure that you're able to make decisions going forward.
Councillors, obviously Councillor Babarowski has taken ill and has had to leave the meeting, and I hope he's okay. But I did just want to recognise the great work that he's done as the Transport Portfolio Head for the last 8 years, and certainly he and I have worked very closely together in developing a long-term plan. Those councillors who've been on the journey for, in some cases, 10 years, in other cases 8 years, and obviously for some of our recently elected councillors only a few months. Wouldn't you like $1 for every time someone said, why don't you get the infrastructure in before you build the houses? Well, here we are at a point in time trying to do exactly that. Even though, and it's worth making the point, public transport is not the responsibility of local government. Some people would say, well, why are you in that space? Well, we're there because nobody else is doing anything about it. The people who are responsible, who are our state government representatives, do not have a plan around public transport on the Sunshine Coast. When invited to submit to our process, nothing. So you can understand why we would be fiercely determined as the representatives of our community that we're entitled to a better deal, and that requires a significant investment in public transport. Now, thus far, we've got the state government to commit to $7.5 million, of which we've got to commit $7.5 million as well, for a $15 million detailed business case. That hopefully will demonstrate not only the need, but what is the appropriate alternative. Joe, when you came to the Sunshine Coast, the Nickel and Way wouldn't have existed 50 years ago. Why didn't they think then to make it 10 lanes? Why didn't they know that the place was going to grow to what it is today? Why didn't they anticipate light rail or rail? Surely they'd seen what had happened in London. That's the challenge we've got. Not to make decisions about what's important today, but what does it look like in a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades and beyond. I note we've come under criticism from the member for Kawana, Jared Blay, in Parliament. And obviously I don't have the benefit of parliamentary privilege here, and I'm just a lowly councillor. But I put more thought into what the Sunshine Coast needs, particularly around transportation, than Mr Blay does, because he doesn't have a plan at all. He's smack bang in the middle of the Sunshine Coast, got some of the biggest investment going on in the area around there. The roads are choked. They're failing now, but no plan, nothing. So why isn't he being held to account for what he's not doing? The 13-kilometre stretch, is, the full length is actually 23 kilometres from Caloundra to Maroochydore. And no doubt over time, and I appreciate there's lots of arguments around this, over time, the right mass transit solution in place will ensure people who live in that area use their cars a lot less. In fact, it may be one of the greatest contributors to housing affordability ever, because people who live there will choose not to have a car because they'll have such a reliable means of transport within 10 metres or 600 metres, as the case might be. Now, there's not a lot Vivian Griffin and I would agree on. But to Vivian's credit, 10 years ago in the Abbott Council, she identified this as being an important measure for the Greater Sunshine Coast. That's 10 years ago. You know, we've had 10,000 people a year since then. That's another 100,000 we've ticked up to already. She did such a good job reportedly advised that the people in Karoi think they're getting light rail. I don't think that's the case, certainly not from our point of view. So I won't be supporting this today because we've got another mass transit meeting next Friday, and I'll be taking my direction from that meeting. I don't think we can afford to have stop-start approaches. If you want to go on my website and see what I committed about public transport and light rail prior to the election, please do. On a two-candidate preferred basis, 57% of the population voted for me, including well over 50% in those three areas of 2, 3 and 4. Now, okay, I had a pretty extensive list of things I was offering up, but this is certainly one of them. So, again, councillors, you know, I've seen the splinter groups who rise up in opposition to everything. The airport, the CBD, the solar farm, Mary Cairncross, and we've seen, and it's not a time to go weak at the knees and say, hey, we've got to stop and reevaluate. You know, there's great work being done, great work being done. If we need to make adjustments, there's a process in place to do that, and that'll continue with our meeting next Thursday. So I want to finish by just saying the other thing that's really important in this game is we're elected to lead. People want us to lead. It's a very scarce commodity. It takes bravery, it takes courage to actually be sure and be confident. By all means, check back. But let's not get overtaken by splinter groups who are anti a range of things and put fear into people without any foundation whatsoever. And that's exactly what that document Terry showed us is seeking to do. Frighten people, you know, avoid the real issue. So that's why I won't be supporting this, and I'll be looking forward to a decision next week in terms of the next stages. Thank you. And on that note, I'm going to go back to Councillor Dixon to close.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I appreciate everybody's input today. It's good. It's great to get the balance of different views, and you can see clearly from my point of view here today that we've all got our own concerns, even with this process. And I think it's been a long journey, a new council, 5 new councillors, and I think it's important for us to just take a bit of a stop, a bit of a break, make sure that we're all on board going forward, because this is a major project, as the Mayor said. It's region shaping and changing. One thing that I said from day one, when I did my first talk here, and I think Councillor Winston actually was very eloquent when he said it, is that some of us committed to better public engagement. And for me to not support this today would mean that I'm not honouring the words that I started with when I began this term. The biggest thing in my mind right now is if we're doing nothing wrong and we've got nothing to hide, then we shouldn't fear or sway from better communication with the public. It's as simple as that. If we're doing the right thing, the strategies are right, and we've got a great plan, let's share that plan and let's get people on board. If there are small groups who aren't supportive of the plan, then I'm sure we will see that as well. But if there is a majority in support of that plan, we will see that feedback through the process. Mr Mayor, I don't want to hijack Councillor Natoli here today. This was not my creation. This was his work, his hard work with his community. I simply wanted to see this get up today to honour that community engagement, and if that meant taking that over, Councillor Natoli, I'm sorry that I've had to do that, but I think hopefully we will get the numbers that we need to at least signal to the community. Although we've got some work coming up and a future decision, there is nothing wrong with telling the Sunshine Coast community, expect better and expect public consultation from us.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Those in favour? Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor O'Prey, Councillor Suarez, Councillor Law, Councillor Johnston, Councillor Natoli. Those opposed? Councillor Cox, Councillor Landsberg, Councillor Jamieson. The motion is carried.